and reach out to everybody and let them know that we're here with the inner circle. Really grateful for all of you being here. Um, and let's send all of our prayers and support to Coach Derek. We want him to rest and take care of himself while we take care of things. And what he really wants is to see you all applying the information and taking action. All right. So tonight we're going to talk about budgeting. Um, I actually had a delay in my travels, so I'm actually broadcasting from my car from the Tesla, but it's okay. Um, we're going to take care of all of our bullets, but it won't be as long as some of our other times. So y'all go ahead and take out your notes, your notepads, your paper and pencils, anything that you take notes with. Open up another screen on your computers or your devices. I'm going to share a lot of information with you, critical information that you need for budgeting. All right. And because I'm on my phone and not my computer, I'm going to be going back and forth in between screens. All right. So if you're ready, I want you to type in the chat box, ready, 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 ready. Let folks know that you're ready. Let me know that you're ready, and we will get started. All ready? You got to stay ready so you don't have to get ready. All right. Today we're talking about budget planning for nonprofits. We're going to discuss how to budget for your program activities, how to plan your expenses for the year, and how to stack the grants to cover those expenses. All right. Okay. Now, in your nonprofit will have a program. There's a difference between your organization and your program. Okay. Your your organization is the thing as a whole, but your organization might have different programs that it does, programs that it utilizes, programs that it offers to the community. Your organization might be Little Debbie's snack cakes for babies. All right, Little Debbie's snack cakes for babies, and that is the name of your program. I mean, that's the name of your organization. But one program might be Snack Cake Factory. Another program might be Baby Nursery. Another program might be parenting classes. All right. So those are three different programs inside of your organization. You can have one organization, and inside that organization, you have multiple programs. All right. You'll have one organization, and inside that organization, you have multiple programs. You have one organization, but inside the organization, you can have what? Fill in the blank. Y'all got to keep up now. Oh, well, maybe I need to check the organization entity in and of itself. All right. So in the for-profit world, your entity might be an LLC, or if it's an S corp, a C corp, might be INC. But when you're in the nonprofit, that company is always an INC. It's an incorporated. It's a corporation, and that single corporation will have multiple programs inside of it. Program has has activities. So if you have an organization, Little Debbie Snack Cakes for Tots, and you have an activity program, which is the Snack Cake Factory, that Snack Cake Factory is going to need things. All right? The things that your program needs are there for your program activities. The stuff that your program needs are considered either personnel, supplies, or overhead. Okay. Personnel, that's all of your staff. Your direct expenses or your program expenses. I'm sorry, I said supplies, but it's your program expenses. And then your overhead or your indirect expenses. I'll go over it again. Your budget is going to have three sections. Section number one is always your revenue. Okay. Section number two is your program. Section number three is your overhead expenses. I'll say it again because that sounded confusing. Your budget is going to have three sections. The first section is your expenses. The second section is your program expenses, or otherwise called direct expenses. Then your third section is called indirect expenses or overhead expenses. Okay. So your budget is going to have three sections. What is section number one? Now, you'll have this recording, so it's okay to take notes and talk. All right. Section number one is your revenue. Section number two is your program or direct expenses. Section number three is your indirect expenses. Okay. Now, there are times that your budget will have a fourth section called personnel. I actually like to consider personnel as part of program, but either way you do it is fine. All right. So I don't want to talk about section number one first. I want to talk about section number two, which is your program expenses. Program expenses are either personnel, that's personnel for your program, or they are the direct expenses for your program. So if you have snack cakes, then whatever it takes to make the snack cakes, that's considered a program expense. Anybody that's working on producing the snack cakes is considered a personnel. Now, I just finished. Finished the grant for $240,000, and I'm going to show you all that one as an example. All right. Section one is revenue. Section two is program. Section three is indirect. That's correct. Share. All right. All right. Let me know that you all can see my screen. Well, I guess on my cell phone, I can only have one screen at a time. All right. Can you all see my screen? Well, I hope you can see it.
We can see it, Coach.
All right. Thank you. Okay. So, this is an actual grant budget. All right. And you'll see I have three I have sections. So up here, you have the income and the revenue. Um, the first one, oh, I said 240,000, but it's actually 280,000. So this box shows the amount that that I'm requesting from them. All right. And then we have the other grants. Some of them have been awarded. Some of them I've only applied for. All right. So there's 250,000, 100,000, 17,000, 65,000, 5,000, 12,000, 65,000. What is that? Okay. 10,000, 25,000. All this together is $831,839. All right. So this is the money that we're raising for the program next year. This is tallied up by all the grants that we have applied for or have been committed. So you see the ones that have been committed, we put them there. The ones that are still pending, we put them there. All right. So I told y'all last week about Wells Fargo approving our grant. It was unofficial then, but they sent me the notice today that the check was coming in the mail. All right. So I want to show you all something just as a side note. You see this says program grants and then $250,000. Well, then I put a note here that says where all these program grants are coming from. So the city gave 45,000, the county 70,000, Truist is pending, Chamber of Commerce is pending, Asheville, they're pending. All right. What we end up doing, if you add all of these up, you actually come to more than $250,000. You come to about $400,000 because whenever you're planning your budget, you do not want to limit it to what you need. I know that sounds weird, but I'm going to say it again. Do not limit your grant proposals to the amount of money you need. Do not limit your grant proposals to the amount of money you need. However much money you need to submit at least twice as many grant proposals or grant proposals that are twice as much. So if you add these numbers up, you'll come to more than $400,000. All right. I put here 250,000, but I've applied for over 400,000 because you do not get all of the grants that you apply for. No matter how wonderful you are, good you are, effective you are, blah, blah, blah. You never get everything that you ask for. All right. So in your budget planning, you always apply for at least 2 times the amount of what you need. That does not mean to double dip. What it does mean is that you need to find 10 or 20 different funding sources. When I hear people say, I need a grant, I know they don't know what they're talking about because you never just one grant. You always need at least 10. And some people look down. I actually had a student that wanted a building, and I told them that they need to start with smaller grants. They want smaller grants. I have grants that are as small as $250 and grants that are as large as $200,000. All right. So let me go on, and you'll hear the source of these Dogwood Health Trust and then program grants. I put other grants, City of Asheville, sponsorships, that's $65,000, donations, mission related revenue. Actually, this nonprofit is going to start offering online courses and membership fees. All right, contracts. These are contracts that the nonprofit has in kind, and then Wells Fargo, and then the total. All right, that's revenue. But I don't want to talk as much about revenue. If any of you have questions about revenue, go ahead and put them in the Q&A, and I will come back. I'll come back to the budget. Okay. I can't check the Q&A. Go ahead and put your question in the, oh, thank you. All right, go ahead and put your question in the chat. I'll take maybe about 3 questions right now, and then I'm gonna go back to the screen and look at expenses. Oh, well, there's the Q&A. All right, is the first section only grants? That's a question from Gladys. No, the first section is not grants. The first section is all revenue. So your revenue can be grants, sponsorships, contracts, in-kind donation. Grants, sponsorships, contracts, in-kind donations. You can also have mission-related revenue. All right. Okay. Thank you. What the next question? When you say apply for at least 10 grants, are you referring to the grant stacking or something else? I am referring to grant stacking. So if you have a after school program, you need food, books, laptops, tablets, field trips, admission to the theme park. You need grants for staff, and you stack it all together in order to cover your expenses. What is the average time from submittal to approval? That is different. The average time from submittal to approval, it is very different for each and every grant. I have applied for, there's a grant that I applied for just now. It was a $50,000 grant spread over 2 years. They give you 25,000 each year. It's a 4-month process, which included 2 rounds of applications, a site visit, and an interview. Another grant that I applied for did a turnaround in 2 days. But every funding source is going to tell you ahead of time frame. For was a 8-month process. All right. So I'm gonna go back to share my screen, and we was there one more question? All right. I'm gonna go back to share my screen so we can go over expenses. All right. Now this is a specific budget. All right. This is a specific grant budget. We're going to support my whole organization. So I'm going to show it to you just on what's needed. All right. So you see my expenses section is broken down into 3. You would do this in a very simple Excel. In column A, you type personnel, and then you skip a couple lines. Your executive director, maybe your operations manager, and then fringe. Fringe is always 30. My fringe is actually 31.65%. Fringe is made up of FICA, FUTA, SUTA. FICA is federal income. Income tax. FUTA is federal unemployment tax. SUTA is state unemployment tax, and the FICA also includes Social Security, that type of stuff. Fringe also includes any retirement or vacation time. Your fringe is normally going to be at least 30%. Mine is actually 31.65%. So however much you're spending in staff time, right here you see one staff person is 50,000, the other is 43,000. I take all those numbers and multiply by 30%, 0.30, and that's what gave me 29,000. All of that together gives me my fringe. Now let's go on to program expenses. These are program expenses. One of our program contracts is $100,000, and so I put that there. You actually want to list all of your expenses. You can be as detailed as you want to be, but this is how I have a big program expense for cities. All right. Now, you could put them in contracts, but I don't. I don't put them in contracts because if you put something in contracts, it's considered overhead. And whenever you are working on your nonprofit budget, they like to see the program expenses be big and the administrative or the overhead expenses be small. Administrative expenses small. Program expenses big, administrative expenses small. Why do you think that is the case? Go ahead, type it in the chat. And then I think I saw Letitia. I want you, oh, well, they can't speak. So I'm gonna look at it in the chat box. Want to see program expenses big, and administrative expenses small. That's right. That's right. They want to make sure that the bulk of the money is going to program and not to overhead. There are even funding sources that says we do not want the money to go to salaries. We want it to go to programs. Then there are other funding sources that say we want you to include salaries. That's right. They want to see the impact of their funds for the program. They do not want you to find sneaky ways to pay for stuff that's not necessary. All right. Okay. Perfect. Now let's go back to the screen. Are y'all keeping up with me? I know I'm talking fast. Um, I just want to make sure I give you as much as I can. Okay, right? All right. So we're back at the shared screen. All right. Incorporation. This program is a business incubator. So we help businesses get started. We pay for incorporation for businesses. So incorporation fees for 30 businesses is $3,750. How do I calculate that? It's $125 per business. And so I type in the formula equals 125 times 30. However much it is, that's how much it is. Right here, I do not have to think about saving money or cutting corners. This is my budget. After I get the money, after I'm aware of how much I've gotten, then I might need to go back to the drawing board and cut down my budget or cut down my expenses. But for right now, this is a wish list. All right. The other thing that we do, we pay for QuickBooks. QuickBooks for 20 Black Wall Street members. How much is QuickBooks? $25 per month times 12 months times 20 members. So boom, that costs $6,000. An event management company. So whenever we throw our yearly event, we pay a management company. That management company charges us $23,000. And so that's the cost right there, $23,000. Vendor space for participants. Whenever our participants want to participate in our event or other events and it charges vendor space, we pay for that. So we allocate each year $19,200. Educational portal, educational portal tech software. We are designing an online academy for our business program. It costs $19,000 to design portal. So $15,000. $15,000 to design it? No, $15,000 to design. Those are separate costs. These are based on the estimate that the company gave to me. So I put it in there. Business supplies for participants. If people are part of my business incubator and they need supplies, we get that grant funded. We request $10,000 for that. Business education classes, $10,000 for that. Furniture, $13,000. Grind Fest costs $95,000. We requested a mobile kitchen. That's a fully stocked food truck, fully branded. That's $100,000. First Fridays, that's our first Friday night of each month. First Friday, we do a thing, and we had to pay for like the liquor license and everything. First Friday is going to cost us a few $1,000s. The Black History Awards will cost us $5,000. Black Wall Street Junior costs us $45,000. That's where we take our young people on a trip. Last year, we went to the Battle of the Bands and to visit the college tour at the Gas South Arena, and went to see the Black Wall Street Junior down there. They paid for the bus, the travel, the hotels, the food, the snacks, the tickets to the Battle of the Bands, and everything. And what our students had to do was write an essay about their experience, what are their plans for college. And then out of that group, we identified 30 Black youth that wanted to test out an entrepreneurial idea. We helped them each raise $1,000 in sales. And next year, our Kernersville. And next, next year, our Grind Fest is going to be targeting youth. So if anybody comes to our festival next year, you're not only going to see adults, but you're going to see a lot of young people selling their stuff at the table because we have been awarded a grant to help them sell. All right. Then you see travel is $10,000 and marketing and outreach is $50,000. All right. Next is our administrative expenses. Our administrative expenses are indirect. These are expenses that are not directly going to the program recipients, but it's in order to keep the program afloat. Our rent is $17,000. Matter of fact, let me point this out. You see where it says rent $17,964, and up here we have a grant for $17,963 or 964. Those numbers are supposed to be the same. Oh no, it's 963. That's because our rent is technically $17,964, but when the city gave us a building, they categorized it as a grant so that we only pay $1. So the grant is for $17,963, and the expense is $17,964, which means that we owe them $1, and this is how they've categorized it each year. All right. So our legal expenses are $10,000. Accounting, that's all our bookkeeping plus the audit is $20,000. Insurance, $15,000. Our city licenses are $3,000. Software is $9,000. Staff training is $10,000. So whatever it takes for staff and board to be trained, it comes out of that line item. For example, if I go to a business conference, that business conference that trains me is covered under the line item of staff training. If I purchase a software that supports my program, that software is a program expense. Okay? All right. Now, let me pause here and answer some questions. Do we let every source know about the request to others? Yes, you do want to let your sources know about requests to others. They want to share. They do not want to be the only ones giving you money. They want to give you a small amount of money and you make a big impact. So if you have applied to 10 different grants, they like that. If you have only applied to them, they do not like that. So when they ask you, where else have you applied? This is not like a girlfriend or a boyfriend saying, who else have you slept with? That's not how they do it. For them, the more the merrier. All right. Next. So is it safe to say that that technically you should apply for your grant 6 months to a year before you get started, or should you already be in motion? How long does it take to have an average or general grant written? Also, if I recollect, you only need one grant written and then tweak it to fit the grants you applying for. Actually, that's good. Good question, Letitia. And I'm going to start with the last one. Yes, it is true that you start with one grant and you tweak it for all of them. Now, you all saw that list, saw that there were at least 15 different grants that had either been awarded or pending, which means that I applied for all of them. Believe it or not, all of those grants came from one grant that was written. and I did not write it this year. I wrote it last. Actually, it comes from a grant that was written 2 years ago. So for people that wonder why do you pay a grant writer 3,000? Well, my rate started 5,000, but the average grant writer you would start at $3,500. Why do you pay a grant writer $3,500? Because they're going to write something that you can eat from for years. I wrote this one grant 2 years ago, and I got $50,000. I tweaked that grant, got another 50. Tweaked that grant, got another 100. Tweaked that grant, got 25. And I'm still tweaking that same grant. And this year, that one grant is producing for me $839,000. So people that don't want to pay, they just don't understand the value. That means that they're not ready. All right. So how long does it take on average to have an average or general grant written? It takes about 20 hours for a smaller one, 40 hours for a longer one. The one that I wrote those years ago, because this is what I do day in and day out, it took me 2 days. A total of about 6 hours. And right now I can write a grant in about 2 hours. But that's because of how how long I've been doing it. But I know that on average it might take another person a few weeks, but it takes me about 2 hours. A difficult grant might take me 3 hours. A federal grant might take me a week or two. But it normally takes other people maybe 6 weeks to write a federal grant. There's, in fact, people actually start on federal grants a year ahead of time because they're so cumbersome. So it's safe to say that technically you should apply for grants 6 months to a year before you get started. I am applying for grants right now that will be funded next year. There are some grants that are only available every other year. And I have already started right now thinking about and strategizing how I can tweak my one grant so that it'll be ready for a grant a year from now. I am always applying. I'm always applying. All right. One question. And yes, you should think 6 to 12 months ahead of time. And the grant itself, when it's announced, will tell you you're applying now, but the money needs to be spent starting July, blah, 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 blah. All right. The next question. What do we need to do for accountability to the funders when we receive more than we budgeted for due to receiving additional grants? Great question. All you have to do is you send an email to your funding source and you ask them for a meeting and you tell them, we actually were awarded a grant to pay for the bicycles, but we still need the money to cover childcare. Or we have received more than we expected. Can we use this for another area? And they'll tell you what you can use it for. What I do, I actually offer them a suggestion, and I do it based on their original funding priorities. So if they told me 3 areas that they will fund, and I've gotten more than I expected, so that one area is covered, then I go back to them and say, we have actually gotten a grant to cover area number 1. Can I use your grant to cover areas number 2 and 3? And I also send them an updated budget that shows it so that they don't have to do the work. I do the work for them. All right. That's normal. And that's called a budget adjustment. Your accountant is actually going to ask you at the end of the year when they do your audit, they're going to ask you for that document. So after you talk to them, after you talk to whoever the funding source is, you want to just confirm it by email and update your budget. All right. Next question. So it's safe to say that once you apply for a grant and are approved and use the grant correctly, that you will more than likely be awarded the grant in the future years to come. That is not a promise. In fact, there are some organizations that say if you have been awarded a grant this year, you are not allowed to apply for 1 year. As a matter of fact, one organization said if you are awarded a grant, you cannot apply to us again for 3 years. So ask for everything you need for 3 years. Foundation grants take how long? All grants are different. All grants are different, but the typical turnaround time for a grant is 6 to 8 weeks. Please question, is there a specific time frame to apply? You should always be applying. All right. Have I answered everybody's question? All right. I want to get as many questions as I can. What is the average salary for the executive director of a nonprofit? That is an ongoing question. It is dependent upon the budget for the year, but the executive director's salary should be no more, absolutely no more, percent of the whole budget. Guidance for the executive director's salary, you can find it on payscale.com. They will ask you your city and your state, and then they'll offer you based on local data statistics. All right. All right. And then there is the other thing you want to think about for setting salaries. You never, ever, ever want salaries to be bolstered. You don't want them to be inflated. And if you want some guidance, there's a YouTube video by a man named Dan Pilato that talks about nonprofit salaries. It's only about 15 minutes, but it's very, very impactful. So take a look at that. His theory is that nonprofits should be paid the same amount as for profits. Of course, if the money is not there, you can't pay them, but that's good. And payscale.com. What was that percent? 10%. No more than what percent? No more than 10%. Absolutely no more than 10%. If you're a newfound nonprofit and you apply for your first grant, do you just estimate how much you will need for the different areas for your organization? I'm so glad you asked because that's the next thing I'm talking about. Where do you get these numbers? I'll tell you where you get them from. You go shopping online, it's called window shopping. And however much stuff costs, that's how much it costs. You don't add to it, you don't take away from it. However much it costs, that's how much it costs. All right. Now, when it comes to hotels and flights, you can look up the GSA rates. You just go to Google, type in GSA rates, and it will tell you how much to estimate for flights and hotels. If you're working on a budget this year and you think you're going to do something next year, but you don't know exactly how much it's going to cost because flights are different, hotels are different, blah, 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 you Google GSA rates. It's going to bring you to a government site. They'll tell you how much hotels are in certain cities at certain during certain years. So the GSA rate for a hotel in Atlanta is such and such. It'll tell you on that website. It'll also tell you how much you're supposed to allocate for food during travel. That's food. And the numbers are very generous. They do not expect you to eat off the dollar menu. Like the numbers are like $17 for breakfast, $22 for lunch, like $35 for dinner. It's enough for you to eat regular. And it's not staying at a resort hotel, but it's staying at like a Hampton Inn. All right. What does GSA stand for? Governmental Standards of Accounting. Is there a time frame to apply? You should be working on your budget now for next year. And the reason that I told you all that we're talking about budgets right now is because typically fiscal years will start, well, for lots of people, fiscal years will start in July. So your budget right now, you should be preparing your budget right now, no matter how small it is, no matter how large it is. You should be preparing your budget right now. Have a board meeting sometime soon in the month of June and get your budget approved for next year. Put your budget up on your website so that when funders are looking and they want to spend money, they know where you are and they know what you want to spend money on. All right. Spiritual conferences, no. Lots of funding sources. They have things that they do not fund, and oftentimes I see where they say they do not fund inherently religious activities. It doesn't matter what your faith is. Your faith is personal to you. And so they do not want to fund and will not fund. They actually will some of them will actually ask for your policy that shows that you don't discriminate and that you will not use this fund for any of your religious activities. They don't care if you do it, they just don't want their money associated with it. So if you do have a faith-based nonprofit, you really need to take my training, Money for Your Mission, so that you can see how to separate your community outreach activities from your inherently religious activities. All right. All right. So the last thing that I want to share with you is at the end of my budget, and it is called the federal de minimis. All right. You all see my revenue is 831,000. I plan to spend 793,000. Then you see this bottom line right here, line number 62, federal de minimis. Now, when I first learned about the federal de minimis, I did not know what was going on. I thought I had everything covered, and it wasn't covered. And I kept coming up short. The reason I kept coming up short is because I had expenses that were not direct expenses and were not direct overhead expenses. They were like miscellaneous things. And then I learned during one of my federal grant trainings that there was a thing called the federal de minimis. That means that there is a standard rate that the US government allows, and that's 10%, that says whatever your total budget is, you can take 10% of that and use for miscellaneous overhead items. So what I started to do was take every single grant and I go back, and after I've calculated everything, the last thing I do is put in the federal de minimis. I say, what was the total budget? And then I take 25% of that. I take 10% of that. All right. Okay, then. So that's my budget. This is budgeting. You go shopping online. You go shopping online and you look up the price for everything. If you want to estimate hotels, flights, and meals, you go to the GSA rate. Type it in Google. It'll take you to the website. It's always a .gov, and you'll see your cities and states and hotels and blah blah blah. All right, all right, y'all. Well, did y'all learn anything tonight? All right. Grant T said, as I look at grants, many have several other registrations required beyond the 501c3. As we apply, do we just follow the instructions of the grant, or do the several registrations or just do the several registrations you recommend in trainings? Do the registrations that I recommend in trainings. I'm glad you asked that question. Sometimes people see a grant and apply for it, and just because you're eligible doesn't mean you're eligible. Just because you're eligible does not mean you're eligible. If you are a 501c3, that's fine. But if you're not registered with ERA Commons, the National Institute of Health, GuideStar, Candid. If you don't have your state solicitation license, there are actually 10 different registrations that you need in order to qualify for as many grants as possible. So some people saying, well, I'm gonna just go on and do it myself. That's fine, but you'll be in a situation where you qualify for a grant and you have a good program fit and you're ready for it. But some of these registrations take 10 days. Some of the registrations take extra paperwork, and it's just not feasible for you to become qualified and apply at the same time. So I always encourage people, get your nonprofit set up properly, get it set up appropriately, get it set up and make sure that it is a grant ready nonprofit. Some people have their nonprofits registered with the state and they talk to me and they like, well, I already got my state stuff done. Well, I don't care you got your state done, you don't have your federal done. And you don't even know it. I mean, people just be so arrogant. It's funny. But that's how folks are. Anyway, what other questions do y'all have? I encourage you. Yeah, payscale.com. Yes. What are the names of the registrations? It's in my my free ebook. So if anybody doesn't have it, you can get the free ebook. I think it's at packet2k.com or something like that. All right. Okay. All right. All right, y'all. Well, was that everything?
All right. So, are there any more questions, guys? Okay.
Most
So
important,
thank you
did you
so
learn
much.
something? If you learned something, say I learned something.
Yeah, they learned a lot, sir. So thank you so much,
Right.
Coach, for today's discussion and wishing you a safe and smooth trip. And also, everyone, uh, for those who attended the meeting tonight, thank you so much and see you all on the next webinar. Have a great night.